Peak oil, you talk about global warming,
With skillful manipulating of
UN, you
press,
talk about the NWO.
they're able to make the victim look like
prepping for
the
mega.
criminal, and the criminal look like the victim.
Once the red carpet gets rolled out for this New World Order program, everything is free game.
I welcome you to Make It Plain
The
TV.
Jew, prior to what you know as Hollywood, prior to Hollywood, fit that prototype. Okay? Let me read some more. The Hollywood Jews had much in common. Most of them had fathers who were financial failures and mothers who were adored. Most were immigrants from Eastern Europe. Very few practiced their Jewish religion, yet almost all of them depend on Jewish control institutions for financing. Most had family connections that aided them in their business. Most had little formal education. These generalizations provide the basis for Gabler's psychologizing of non-Jews as well. Frank Capra, one of the great cinematic geniuses, maintained a strained symbiotic relationship with Harry Cohen of Columbia Pictures. Capra was Italian and not Jewish, as was the founder of the Bank of Italy, Armando Peter Gianni. When non-Jewish controlled banks refused loans to the new film industry, Gianni formed an alliance with the Jews of Hollywood and backed their productions. Gabler's explanations of this anomaly is that Capra and Gianni, like the Hollywood Jews, were marginal to the cultural establishment and had similar European impoverished backgrounds. Outsiders united against the powerful common enemy, who was the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, right? As for Darryl Zanuck of Warner Brothers, the fact that he was not Jewish did not appear. Okay. So one of the things that took place in Europe that people don't actually speak about, if you're not into the history, is something called the pogroms, right? The pogroms were basically when the Jews were being terrorized and the Jews were being murdered they were being lynched, all right? The better word for that is that they were being lynched, okay? They were being ran down upon in their settlements. Their settlements were called ghettos. Their settlements were called ghettos. Before black people were moved into what is known as ghettos with projects, the first inhabitants of those ghettos, both in Europe and in the Americas, were the Jews. When you see the Joker movie, he's in the ghetto. All of the shots that I just showed you, the adverts for the poster, he's in the ghetto, he's in the projects. They got the project buildings behind him. You understand? He's in the hood. And when they paint the picture of this 1980s Gotham and whatnot, which is basically a 1980s New York, you basically see that that aspect of the ghetto. You see that aspect of the hood. Okay? So these pogroms were basically why a lot of the Jews fled from their countries and came over to the Americas and other places in Europe. Okay. Okay. So let me read something about the pogroms so we have a better understanding. What were some of the worst pogroms in history? Pogroms continue to occur in the early 20th century. Particularly violent were the pogroms from 1903 to 1906. The horrific 1903 pogrom in Kishinev in what is now Moldova killed dozens of Jews and resulted in the destruction of hundreds of homes and businesses, prompting tens of thousands of Russian Jews to flee. The Zionist poet Haim Naiman Bialik wrote his famous poem, City of Slaughter, in response to the Kishinev pogrom. The 1905 pogrom in Odessa left about 2,500 Jews dead. The 1919 Cossacks led a pogrom in Kiev, which is Russia, in which they killed 14 people and injured and raped others. Now, this is interesting when you read about the pogroms, because basically what's going on in Palestine when the Israeli settlers are taking land are the same thing that basically was happening to them. You know, when these Palestinians are getting run off of their land and whatnot, and they're getting pillaged, and their communities are being pillaged, you know, there's pogroms taking place. There's pogroms taking place. So these pogroms created a very psychological disposition, right, in the minds of what we know now today as Jews, who, as black people, we don't understand these people. I need y'all to put them thumbs up, though. We don't understand these people. We do not understand the psychosis. We don't understand why these people are in bed with the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, or AKA the system. We don't have a better understanding about them because we're not allowed to even learn about them, because they're not taught about, they don't teach us about these people in school. Why? Maybe because they designed the curriculum. All right. So what factors led to the pogroms? The main inspiration for these vicious attacks was the ideology of anti-Semitism, which blamed Jews for the weakened economic conditions and political instability, in addition to the claim that Jews murdered Jesus, and the blood libel myth that Jews murdered Christian babies and baked their blood into matzvah. So blood libel, right? Blood libel, the spilling of innocent blood, blood libel, the murdering of children, blood libel. All of this is going to factor in as I show you what's going on in this movie. Blood libel, the fact that the Jews were drinking blood of, you know, innocent children. That harkens back to what we know as adrenochrome, what we talked about in the Into Deep series, which is the quote unquote blood of young children that has secreted a particular enzyme, or a particular, you know, a particular enzyme that's basically an elixir that is sought after by many people in power. Many people in power today. Okay, yeah, there's a movie with Brad Pitt about it. It's also mentioned in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. All right. Okay. It's also mentioned in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas with Johnny Depp. So remember what I was talking about when I said that aspect. I'm going to get back to that. So the Jews were basically being burned. The Jews were basically being ran out and whatnot. And, you know, they came to America. They're not functionally white. They're not considered white. All right. And when they invented Hollywood, what they did is they created a version of America that never existed. They created a version of America that was not true. Okay? They colonized America's image of themselves. Okay? Let me read this real quick. An empire of their own, how the Jews invented Hollywood. Perhaps the point of Neil Gabler's lively history is like the story of the three blind men who tried to describe an elephant. Countless observers have written brilliantly about the tail and trunk of Hollywood, but no book has quite gotten to the whole animal that Mr. Gabler does. The point of his book is that the American film industry, which Hill Hayes, president of the Original Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, called the quintessence of what we mean by America. Okay? Was founded and for more than 30 years operated by Eastern European Jews who themselves seem to be anything but the quintessence of America. But above all things, these moguls wanted to be regarded as Americans, not Jews. They wanted to reinvest themselves here as new men. And in doing so, the Hollywood Jews created a powerful cluster of images and ideas, so powerful that In a sense, they colonized the American imagination.
Who to this very day still commit the wicked crime of ritual murder. Most Jews, if asked about ritual murder, will vehemently deny any knowledge of it, of course. And they're probably telling you the truth. If there are Jewish hate-mongers who engage in these acts, and there is strong evidence to indicate such, it is probably only a small number of them. So if this is indeed the case, one question still remains. What makes these crimes stand out apart from other cruel acts committed by man against man in the past? The answer to this question is not a pretty one. Based on numerous reports from the past to modern times, the main difference is the degree of cruelty. Reports say children sacrificed in Jewish occult rites were tortured to death in the most cruel and heartless ways imaginable. After the ceremony, Jews reportedly dried the child's blood, often absorbing it into paper, for their various occult rites. Aside from claims of Jewish ritual murder being carried out in an extremely vicious manner, there's one other difference that sets this crime apart from others. When such crimes are uncovered, not only the local Jewish groups, but Jews from all over the entire world seek to conceal it. In the past, Jews have even set aside a special fund to cover up such acts. However, by doing this, they become, as the police might say, an accessory after the fact. From time to time, there have been brave and honest Jews who would deviate from their kinsfolk and admit to the truth of these crimes. While such honesty was not common amongst Jews, it still occurred on occasions. For this reason alone, a blanket indictment against all Jews cannot be made. Indeed, some Jews, young and old, have admitted these crimes in front of court, written about them in books, discussed them in debates, and so forth. For the most part, however, Jews typically deny such accusations. They have even developed a phrase for this type of accusation: blood libel. This term is often used as a rallying cry amongst Jewish groups. But let's go to the crux of the matter. When did it begin? And is there evidence to show that this has been a regular occurrence? Usually, when you think of Jews and human sacrifice, you would probably think of the incident between Abraham and Isaac in the Old Testament, where Abraham believed his God wanted him to sacrifice his son, until an angel supposedly appeared and told him otherwise. Many people erroneously believe that human sacrifice amongst Jews ended right then and there for all Jews. But just think about that for a second. Now, Abraham, here he is getting ready to sacrifice his very own son. Abraham reportedly stopped. But what about all the other Jews? Did they too? There is strong evidence to suggest otherwise.
Jewish sacrifice in the Old Testament occurs in many, many more places than simply the better-known story of Abraham and the sacrifice of his son Isaac. Jephthah the Gileadite is cited in Judges 11, King Ahaz, King Manasseh, Jeroboam, many others engaged in this practice, this diabolical practice.
Children who were sacrificed were often burnt in a pit called a tophet. Drums were beaten in an attempt to conceal the child's cries. This practice was quite prevalent amongst Jews who lived in Carthage around 300 years before Christ and who worshipped Baal, another name for Lord. Even today you'll hear of a Rabbi Baal. Just do a search on the internet. When losing a battle in Syracuse, nearly 500 children were tossed into a burning tophet as a sacrifice to Baal. Sometimes children were put in the arms of a bronze bull, which had a furnace below it, and those committing this vicious act then allowed the flames to consume the child. The level of cruelty in these cases knew no bounds. One thing that some may find rather odd is the key term used by Jews to describe their act of human sacrifice. They call it Holocaust. As surprising as this may seem to some, the word Holocaust is a Jewish word that was used to describe the act of putting a child into the flames as a sacrifice to their deity. Of course, Jews have assigned a completely different meaning to the term nowadays, but if you take a look at an older dictionary, you will see that we're right about this.
Holocaust is a most interesting term. Literally, it means a burnt offering. And they want you to think, the Jews want you to think mostly of the alleged burnings of World War II era. But it really goes back to the ancient Semitic god Moloch, who demanded the sacrifice of children burned alive in a huge, horrible temple that was built to him. The worship of Moloch was brought in by the foreign concubines of Solomon and became rather firmly established in ancient Israel.
Ancient historians such as Appian, Democritus, and Posidonius described instances of Jewish ritual murder. In 168 before Christ, Appian reported an intended victim, an adult, not a child, was found at the Jewish temple.
This channel is dedicated to bringing truth to power and engaging our enemy with intellectual warfare. The dominant society will never switch up their playbook, so we must make a new one. The war we find ourselves in is a technological war, using technology, propaganda, and psyops to oppress and control you. Black intelligentsia, please share the new black media, counter propaganda arm, Make It Plain TV.